Hello and welcome to another episode of the Talking NorCal podcast, Active NorCal's official podcast. I'm your host, Zach O'Brien. With me here, as always, it's Positive Bob. How you doing, Bob?
Positive, positive, positive.
It's good to stay positive because there's not much to stay positive about here in Northern California.
Hey, every day above ground is a positive day.
That's true. It looks like the apocalypse outside. The sky is red. There's smoke everywhere. There's ash all over the ground in my driveway.
I literally got a car wash this morning, and by the time I was home, my car was already covered with ash.
Huge mistake.
Well, yeah, I spilled orange juice on my car, so I need to get a car wash.
Yes, we're recording this right now. There's a bunch of fires going on, and we're going to spend, the first 20, 30 minutes of this podcast just talking about that. There's nothing else that even remotely matters in NorCal right now other than these historic fires.
Except for the two wonderful, wonderful interviews we have coming up.
We do have some fun interviews. So we have actually two recurring guests. We have the patriarch of Active NorCal, Chip O'Brien, our father, coming on to talk about the salmon runs on the Sacramento River. They're going strong right now. The Chinook salmon runs, and then our friend Marcus Duvoisin, who founded Ooowee Adventures. Ooowee. He's coming back on just to give us an update on all his guided tours this summer, and he also has a mega adventure that he is promoting for Ooowee Adventures. So we'll get to that a little bit later. First, make sure to subscribe to the Talking NorCal podcast. We're everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. We're everywhere. Follow us on social media as well. We'll be posting video clips on our Talking NorCal Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube as well. So follow us everywhere. We appreciate your support. Let's hop into this episode with the Tahoes. Hella NorCal.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to do to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal.
So it's unfortunately that time of year again here in Northern California. Well, actually, to be honest, it's not quite fire season yet. Usually these big fires come later in October, November, but this year we are seeing some historic stuff, and we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. The sky is red. There's smoke everywhere. There's millions of acres of land burning throughout California. There's, whole towns have been devastated, and quite frankly, there's nothing else that it warrants conversation about other than these fires.
It's fortunate that the new norm is every fire season outdoing one another. Like, it seems like every year, not only is it normal for us to have these crazy, ridiculously huge fires, but they just keep seeming to outdo one another every year.
We are in historic. It's getting really, really bad as far as acreage burned. And what's really disconcerting about all these fires, and we'll get into sort of some of the big ones here shortly, is you see some of these larger fires early in the fire season, whether that be July, August. The Mendocino Complex fire was the largest ever in California, and that happened in like July of 2018. And then when you get to October, November, that's when the super destructive, super deadly ones happen, like the Camp Fire or Tubbs Fire.
Those years that were really dry didn't get those November rains yet, and
right.
Everything kind of
it hits its peak of dryness and fuels, and that's when it gets really scary. And so that's where my concern lies. I mean, obviously, we have some immediate issues going on right now with all the fires going on. But, we have to stay ready because it's not going anywhere. We have, unless we get some great rain, it's not going anywhere for 2 months. So it's terrifying. and like you said, it's the new norm, and I don't know what we do. I don't necessarily know what to say about it other than we, stay safe. But let's get into a couple of these fires. And, we weren't able to go over some of the earlier ones that were caused by lightning a couple weeks ago. Well, we went into them a little bit, but we didn't know how big they would become. There's the CZU Lightning Complex fire, which, the SCU. I keep saying SCU Lightning Complex fire, which is now the third largest wildfire in California's history. And that's the one that's burning down in like the Santa Cruz area that took out Big Basin's Redwood State Park. So that, like I said, third largest in California's recorded history. We have the LNU Lightning Complex fire. That's the one over in Napa and Sonoma, and it burned into like Vacaville and Fairfield. That's the fourth largest in California's history at 375,000 acres. So just between the two of those, you're almost at 1 million acres burned. They're still burning, by the way. I mean, those have been going on for weeks. You have the August Complex fire, which you don't hear a ton about. It's in a pretty rural area. It is now the second largest wildfire in California's recorded history. These are all currently burning.
2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4. And don't even stop me there. But August Complex fire has a really solid chance of becoming the largest fire in California's history. Like, it's only the Mendocino Complex fire is the only one bigger. It's, what is it, like 40,000. It has to burn 40,000 more acres to take that unfortunate crown. And that's what scares me. The August Complex fire, it's in a similar area. It's, Mendocino Complex was in Mendocino and Lake County and Colusa and Glen. The August Complex is in Mendocino, and it's pretty rural, so not a ton of structures are at risk. But it's at a similar time and a similar growth from the Mendocino Complex, and then we know what happened after the Mendocino Complex, the Carr Fire and Camp Fire in 2018.
And if you see the pictures from the August Complex fire, it literally looks like Armageddon there. I mean, the most red... I mean, we've seen a lot of red skies in the NorCal fire history, but some of those pictures I saw coming out today, unbelievably red skies in Mendocino.
Well, and we'll get into the smoke because it's historic. We've never seen anything like it. Never.
I was trying to do a little bit of background research for this podcast, and I just kind of did a little research on the history of the biggest fires in California, and I found a very outdated article that was published in like 2018. But at that point, it listed the top 20 most destructive wildfires in California history, and of the 20, I just scrolled through it real quick. 5 of them maybe were before the year 2000, and it was spread out like 1939, like 49, like it was very spread out. And then starting in like 2002 to 2020 was 15 of the top, and that is a very outdated article. And so it's just astonishing to see the exponential rate of the fire increase from the year basically 2000 to 2020. Unbelievable.
I've written a lot about this subject, and all the big, large, destructive, deadly wildfires have been occurring recently within the past, decade, 20 years or so. But we're not even done with this list here. So so the Creek Fire is over by Yosemite. It's in the Sierra National Forest. About 300 campers were trapped. It grew so quickly that they were trapped, and the National Guard had to come in and lift them out. Some people were stuck for like 48 hours on a peak because there's no way to get in and out. And
2 different groups airlifted out.
No, there were more than that.
But it was a group of 224 people, and then a separate group of 81 people in 2 separate locations, from what I understand. Right?
Well, the group of 81 was in like 3 separate locations, and the 224 was all at the Mammoth Pools Reservoir. But that just shows you that it happened so quick that they couldn't escape. They were literally being told there was a helicopter flying overhead with a big speaker system, and they were saying, "Go to the water, go to the water. That's the only place we can even get close to landing. And if the fire reaches the shore, jump in the water. That's all you can do." I mean, that's how dire the situation was. It was crazy. And it's over near Yosemite. They're currently, wrapping the buildings of Mariposa Grove in Yosemite National Park to, in case the fire gets all the way there. They're wrapping some of the redwoods. They use this wrap that is supposed to be like fire repellent, I suppose.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And so they're already preemptively trying to stop the fire in Yosemite. And that leads us to, there's plenty of other fires going on, by the way. Did you have any others that you wanted to discuss? There's the one up in Humboldt. There's just so many. It's so hard to keep track of all of them. But the big story today, the big news, is the Bear Fire and or the North Complex Fire. So the North Complex Fire has been burning for 3 weeks in Plumas National Forest. And it was a couple days ago, it was 51% contained. These historic winds come off the ridge, and it pushed the fire to do things that we've never seen. It was shades of the Car Fire when the flames came down the ridge off Whiskeytown and into Redding, and it was of speeds we've just, and this was even faster. I mean, we don't have all the information on this fire yet, but it was pushed basically 20 miles in just hours. It burned 200,000 acres in 24 hours. And that's to put that in perspective, it's already the 5th largest wildfire in California's history. And just 2 days ago, it was not even near the list. It grew at the most alarming rate I've ever seen. The entire town of Berry Creek gone, completely decimated. And I haven't been to Berry Creek in a long time. I drove through it a long time ago, but there's probably 400 homes there. The last census they did there was like 525 people. The fire landed at Lake Oroville, basically surrounded Oroville, and they've done one hell of a job of keeping it there, because if it passed into the town of Oroville, I mean, that's a lot of people that live there. So we don't know the size of this. It's called the Bear Fire, but basically the North Complex Fire had some embers blow a couple miles away, and it started a spot fire, and that spot fire grew 200,000 acres in 24 hours. So that's why it's confusing, but the Bear Fire and the North Complex Fire are the same but different, if that makes sense.
They were separate fires that joined together and are now just one big fire.
No, well, the Bear Fire was started by the embers of the North Complex Fire.
Right.
So it technically is the same fire, but it was such a different situation that they don't name it the same thing. They named it separately, but it's so if you talk about just about the North Complex Fire, which was the original fire plus the Bear Fire, it's the 5th largest fire in California's recorded history in 24 hours. So right now, we have the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th largest fires in California's recorded history burning all at once.
And they all could move up in ranking.
They will. They can't necessarily move up in ranking unless they get to first, because they're competing with each other at this point. It's like a bunch of runners that have already beaten a record, and they're just racing each other. And it's all because of this crazy windstorm that happened. I mean, yesterday here in Sacramento, the wind was just unbelievably strong. Yeah.
And it's already so smoky out, and it smells like there's a campfire right outside as soon as you step outside your door. And the fact that these winds, I mean, I was thinking about it yesterday. If you pour gasoline on a fire, it's absolutely going to accelerate it. But I mean, I feel like strong winds like that are probably even more fuel for flame than like gasoline. I mean, it's like they're similar. If you look at like 20, I think I looked and it said 24-mile-an-hour wind. I feel like it had to have been much stronger than that.
They recorded 50
Right.
up on the ridge. Yeah.
Imagine 50-mile-an-hour winds fed into this natural area that is just so flammable already. It's already on fire, and then hit with a wind of 50 miles an hour. I mean, that will easily move that fire probably 25 miles per hour in whatever direction the fire is going. And so it's crazy that like I said before, every year just keeps outdoing itself. And it was yesterday 1,000% because of those winds.
Well, what's interesting about wind is the embers can move. And so containing it is nearly impossible because the fire is now flying overhead. And there's nothing you can do on the ground about it. That you can't put it out in the air. It's it reminds me of the car fire, and my close friend lived out there near Whiskeytown, and his house was fine. Him and his neighbor's house were fine, and all of the houses on one side and the other side are all burned, right? Because the fire's moving so fast with the wind, it just skips it. It's just flying over the air, lights a house, and just keeps going.
No rhyme or reason.
Yeah, and so it's the wind. Certainly, we have fuels that we need to deal with, but it's mostly the wind and the dryness and the drought that we've experienced over this past 5 years that's really pushing it. So we have to talk about the smoke. I've never seen anything like it.
Not me either.
So I woke up this morning. I woke up early because I was I was stressed knowing what the fire was doing late last night when I went to bed, and then waking up, I knew that it was going to be bad news and I had to see with my own eyes. So I woke up and went outside. My driveway is covered in ash. Covered. As the sun's rising this morning, it's red. The photos from all over, mostly the Bay Area, but even, up way north, near the Oregon border, in Redding, in Chico, all over Yuba County, it's red. It's apocalyptic. There's no other way to describe it. And it's because the fire, we've just never seen a fire burn that much, that quickly, and create that much smoke on top of all the other fires burning. So, we've dealt with a lot of fires, not only over the past 4 years, but you and I have dealt with fires our entire life. Growing up in Redding, I've had plenty of friends lose their houses even when we were young, and a lot of fires go on up there. And so we're used to smoke. We're used to seeing smoke in the summertime. This is just crazier than anything I've ever seen. 2020 just won't stop. The only thing the coronavirus couldn't cancel is wildfire season.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of sports moved around, but not only was fire season going to come, it was going to hit us in an unprecedented way this year.
Yeah.
And it's not even over. We're like not even in fire season, quote unquote.
Yeah. And so all of the national forests in California closed.
Every single one of them.
There's no dispersed camping allowed.
No one's you shouldn't go outside anyways. It's hazardous. There's so much smoke. Not even just in Northern California. Southern California is on fire too.
Yeah, it's and basically they're just, because if people are out there, people are going to start fires. That's just the bottom line. And right now we are spread so thin with our fire resources that it's just not worth letting anyone go anywhere. It's crazy. So all these places are closed. Just stay home until we're clear of this, please, and thank you. But it was interesting. So we were a print magazine for 2 years, and then in 2016 we went fully digital. And we were sort of figuring out, when you're doing a print magazine, you have a certain amount of stuff you talk about. But when you go digital, it opens up your avenues to create so much more content and write a lot more. And so we're finding different things that we wanted to write about on the website. And I remember I was going supposed to go to an event in October of 2017, and this event was canceled because of smoke, the Tubbs fire. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, we got to talk about these fires because if they do impact what you can do outside, right? And I had no idea that the following year I'd be dealing with the largest fire in California's history, Mendocino Complex Fire. Then the most destructive wildfire in California's history in the Carr Fire. Then that got beat by the newest, most destructive, and the deadliest wildfire in California's history, the Camp Fire. And, last year we had the start of the PG&E blackouts, and we had all sorts of evacuations, even though last year wasn't nearly as bad as the years we've seen prior, or this year. It was still, people have this PTSD going on in current time that they're scared, and, if you don't have power, how do you get alerts? If there's a fire coming your way, there's all sorts of issues. And, the tough thing is this is happening so quickly. It's just grown to such a monumental disaster zone in Northern California over the last 3 years that it's just hard to not only, take in this information, but figure out how are we going to deal with this moving forward. And eventually we just won't have anything left to burn, right? I mean, that's all I can sort of think about, I guess.
Well, all that being said, we all know of the fire danger. I would still this is the place that I want to live, Northern California. I'm not all of that destruction, all the danger, all of that known. I ain't going anywhere.
But it begs the question, you want to be in Northern California, great. But where in Northern California, right? We have all these communities that seem to be just so at risk. And look, we don't have all the information about, all the structures that were burned in this bear fire and potential lives that were lost. I mean, the Camp Fire, we only, found out weeks later when we found people's remains that they had passed. So we don't know what we're going to see, but it's when you're looking at a place to live in NorCal, it's something you now have to consider. And, I read an article about a guy in Berry Creek who said he just wanted to, he just bought a cabin up there like a year ago, and he just wanted to live off the grid, and boom, it's all gone in one instant. So, I'm really worried about this coming 2 months because I don't know how much more of this we can take as an economy with the housing. We see what happened in Chico when all the people were displaced from the Camp Fire and their housing, was terrible. We've seen how it can hurt an economy. And it's our friends in Redding who lost their houses in the Carr Fire are just now getting their houses back. So it's a tough day today. It's a tough day. It's been a tough couple years. When I decided to cover fires for Active NorCal in 2017, I had no idea what I was in for, and it's been a whirlwind to say the least. But this is the new normal, and this is what it's like living in California and visiting, and it's stuff we just have to talk about because you can't even go outside anymore. What else are we going to talk about? So tough day. Again, we're recording this Wednesday afternoon. Stuff could have changed, and hopefully for the better, not for the worse. But just stay safe out there. Thank your local firefighter because they are spread so thin right now. And they're working really hard, and they're putting their lives on the line. But there you go. That's our tough opening. So now we are going to get into a lighter subject. It is the Chinook salmon run going on in the Sacramento River, and we had an interview with Chip O'Brien, who is a expert on all things the Sacramento River. So let's go to our interview with Chip. All right, now we'd like to welcome onto the podcast the patriarch of active NorCal, Chip O'Brien, our father. He's also the author of a river journal, Sacramento River, among other various magazine articles and active NorCal articles and fishing books. Chip, welcome on.
Thank you very much, Zachary and Brian.
So
Good to be.
I wanted to get you on because you sort of have a unique look at the Sacramento River. You wrote a book on it. You have fished it a bazillion times. And right now we're going through the Chinook salmon run, otherwise known as the king salmon run. And we posted this article about this 85-pound salmon that was found on Battle Creek right off the Sacramento River. Do you remember that?
Yes. 2008 November, I think it was. They were just astounded because typically, the species is able to grow that big and larger, but one that size in the Sacramento River is pretty dang uncommon. So it was really good to see.
Yeah, it was the largest fish they found since 1979, and the largest they've seen since. They believe it was over 90 pounds when it died. And the photos of it are just astounding. How does a fish like that get up into Little Battle Creek? You know, that thing is huge.
Well, a mature salmon like that is, basically you said it's 90 pounds. It's 90 pounds of muscle. Those fish are incredibly powerful. I know this sounds like a fish story, and I've got a million of those, but I hooked one that I think would have gone 100 pounds in the Dean River up in British Columbia once. It leapt out of the water more than 6 feet when I hooked it, and I had it on for probably less than 15 seconds because I was only using 18-pound test, and a fish that big, the fish was fully 5 feet long. It was amazing. So they're able to grow that large, but in the Sacramento River, an 85-pound or whatever it was is, like I say, extraordinarily large.
Is that why you don't see a lot of fish caught like that? Because people just simply aren't using thick enough test for fish that big?
I don't, every river is different, and it's the typical fish in the Sacramento River just don't normally get that big. That fish had an extraordinary 3 years in salt water and happened to find a lot of food.
That's the
only way that happened.
I guess it's somewhat genetics, but also it's a combination of being able to get a lot of food while just having huge genetics, right?
Exactly.
So that no, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say it's kind of funny. You can look at the scales on a salmon or a steelhead or any anadromous fish and really see the difference between they're starting out their life and ending their life in freshwater versus the years they spend in the salt. The fish scales, when you look at them under a microscope, are a lot like the rings of a tree. Okay, and just like with a tree, when the rings are far apart, there was a lot of water. So, but with a fish, when the rings are far apart, there was a lot of food. And so in freshwater, they're eating insect larvae primarily, just little tiny things, little bits of protein. But when they get to the ocean, there's so much more food, and as they grow, they're able to eat larger and larger meals, and they grow much faster. So it's kind of interesting.
This fish in particular, and many that go on the Sacramento River, was most likely the product of the Coleman Fish Hatchery, correct? Battle Creek feeds the largest continental salmon hatchery in the continental United States. So is this, it's either a fish that came from Coleman or a fish that its lineage is from Coleman, right?
Not necessarily. Probably it is because they produce, what the with considering the other 5 hatcheries that contribute salmon to the river. They're putting 32 million salmon smolts in the river every year. So chances are pretty good chances that it came from Coleman Fish Hatchery. But there's also spawning in Battle Creek outside of the hatchery. Natural spawning. And it could even possibly be a fish that just went up the wrong creek. They do that from time to time. Maybe it spawned in Bee Gum Creek or Cottonwood Creek or one of those. But most likely it was from Coleman Fish Hatchery because just statistically there's so many fish that come from there.
It's interesting because we live right there. Battle Creek is not that big, and yet
Right.
it's just this huge spawning ground. One of the biggest on the west coast of the United States for fish like that. I know you know really well about sort of the life cycle of a salmon. So tell me a little bit. What's the life of a salmon like from hatching to going to the ocean to coming back?
Well, it's pretty precarious, as a matter of fact. When those fish start out, obviously they aren't 85-pound or 90-pound fish. They're little teeny little smolts. And when you're a smolt heading downstream toward the ocean, which they do, a couple of months after they spawn, it's anybody's game. Everything is trying to eat them. They have to go down through so many different obstacles, dams and so on. At least they've removed the Red Bluff diversion dam, which historically would stack those fish up below it. And one of the big predators in the Sacramento River are the native pike minnows, which are very piscivorous. They eat a lot of other fish, but that's why they started having pike minnow fishing derbies and trying to thin those out a little bit so more salmon can actually go downstream past that obstacle. But they're eaten by every kind of fish in the river. From up north, the primary fish in the Sacramento River in Redding, for example, would be the rainbow trout, and they gorge on fry. But even before they become fry, they start out as eggs, obviously, and a real popular tactic this time of the year, September and October in the Sac, a lot of those fly fishing guides are fishing patterns that look like salmon eggs. Now, it's not considered cricket to fish on salmon redds, but the trout sort of congregate below the redds so that when an egg gets dislodged, it sort of tumbles in the current, and a rainbow trout has a really super high protein meal right there. So they gorge on those dislodged eggs. But as you go further downstream and the river starts to warm, you get down at or below Red Bluff, you've got other warm water species, different sorts of bass, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, striped bass, which is another anadromous fish. But these guys are just all about eating anything that swims by, and at certain times of the year, that's likely going to be a Chinook salmon smolt. So they prey heavily on those, unfortunately. And then, the further you get down, as the Sacramento River nears the Pacific Ocean, way further downstream, you get a whole series of sloughs, which are kind of backwater areas that are almost more like lakes than streams, and the fishing down there can be absolutely outrageous. For bass and all sorts of different kinds of bass, and pike minnows also. And they're just so all the way down the system, it's like a gauntlet for those fish. Everything in the river is trying to eat them, So, the other extraordinary thing about that 85 or 90-pound salmon they found in Battle Creek was all the obstacles that fish in its lifetime had to avoid. I don't know what percentage of the fish that come out of the Sacramento River actually make it to the ocean. Probably a pretty small percentage. Most are eaten on the way. So that fish avoided all those obstacles, all those creatures that want to eat them.
Predators, yeah.
So then they spend 3 years out in the ocean gorging, And that's when they really put on a huge growth spurt. And of course, they're also trying to, avoid things like orcas and the things that eat them in the ocean. But then when it comes time to re-enter fresh water and to, procreate their species, they have to go through all those same obstacles all over again. Some fish take a wrong turn. Maybe the fish came from Coleman Fish Hatchery, but maybe they'll go up some other stream by mistake. So there's just so many things that could happen to a salmon. So statistically, when you see a fish that's that big, it just boggles my mind at how that fish stayed alive to grow to that size with all these things trying to prey upon them.
Yeah, you mentioned taking a wrong turn, and
Yeah.
I guess we don't necessarily understand what makes salmon and steelhead are the same tick, right? We don't know why as soon as they're 2 months old, they go straight to the ocean, and then about 3 years later, or whatever the time frame be, they go right back to where they were born. We just don't know what it is in their biology that makes them tick like that, right? So how could they take a wrong turn if they've made it all these different ways and it's in their system? Are they just, maybe they're tired, maybe they're running from predators? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I can't exactly get inside the mind of a salmon, but what they're really renowned for is the accuracy of what you might call their genetic GPS, call it that. So every stream has a taste to a fish, all right? And from thousands of miles outside of freshwater, out in the ocean, those fish are capable of picking up the tiniest particles that signify home to them. In other words, the very place they were hatched, they were spawned. A lot of fish can roam for tens of thousands of miles out in the ocean, then somehow know where to swim to follow those tiniest of tiny traces of their home stream, but they can pick it up somehow. And it's one of those things that we don't really understand, but I for one am happy in not understanding it, because it's just, to me, it's so magical that they're so sensitive that they can pick up their home stream thousands of miles out in the ocean. And there are fish, we were talking about the ones that take the wrong turns. Most do not take wrong turns. Most fish are somehow able to find the very place, the very red that they were spawned in. And some of these fish will go back, the ones who spawn naturally in the river, will go back and somehow find the very, very red nest that they were hatched in, and that's where they will procreate, lay their eggs and have them fertilized. It's really extraordinary, and like I say, pardon my use of the word magical, but that's what it is to me.
And how long after they hatch their eggs? How long until they die?
That's kind of individual for fish. I mean, those fish aren't, their body starts to change once it goes back at that stage of its life into fresh water. They everything in their body is about laying or fertilizing eggs. So they don't eat. All right, their digestive system actually starts to decompose once they enter that last stage of their life.
Oh.
So now you might wonder, okay, well, how do fishermen catch them then? Well, there are other reasons that fish will hit things like salmon eggs or other types of flies or lures or that sort of thing. One thing that anglers have learned is that you can really make a salmon angry, and they'll just out of sheer orneriness, they'll try to kill something. And if there's a hook in it, well, lucky fisherman.
That's fascinating. I don't think I knew that. So they're not hungry for the most part. They're just
right.
They're just pissed off.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Wow.
Well put.
That's cool. So before Shasta Dam was built, the Sacramento River went all the way up to Mount Shasta, and it forked off both to the Pitt River and McCloud River, and those rivers used to have salmon runs, right?
Well, not just salmon runs, but some of the historically most significant salmon runs in the world, particularly the McCloud, was just really, I mean, that's why the Baird Fish Hatchery was put on the McCloud River in those days. And of course, it's now at the bottom of Shasta Lake. But yeah, that was at one time the largest salmon hatchery in the world. And that's just because, the sheer numbers of fish that went up the McCloud, but also, like you said, the Pitt and the Upper Sac. The first of those three streams that really started to be developed was the Upper Sacramento River, because in those days the road sort of went north along the river. It was just easier to cut a road next to the river than up through the mountains. And so you've got camps of different groups building the bridges that exist. Highway 99 along the Upper Sacramento River. A lot of these bridges and structures that are in place still today were built by camps of typically Chinese laborers well over 100 years ago. And it wasn't uncommon in those days, because they had to feed these people. They just chucked dynamite in the river,
Yeah.
and whatever floated up was dinner. And so there was a lot of abuse in those days, because in those days we kind of thought our natural resources were sort of infinite. There's so many fish, we can't possibly damage them. And now we know that's not true. But
Did you see recently they found 2 explosive devices in the Sacramento River in Red Bluff?
yeah, I did see that on Active NorCal magazine, as a matter of fact.
That's insane. But
Yeah.
I remember reading that the Native Americans on the McCloud River, and I don't know who that is. That the Pitt River tribe that would have been on the McCloud right there?
Would have been the Wintu tribe.
The Wintu,
sure.
right? That they could just walk across the river during the salmon runs and just because they could just step on the salmon and they didn't even have to go in the water. I remember reading that.
I think if you tried that, you'd get very wet.
Yeah,
I mean,
obviously it's a metaphor for how great the runs were in the McCloud River back then.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And they learned, those tribes learned to make fish hooks. There was a particular bone found in the head of pike minnows that kind of made sort of an old-fashioned fish hook. And, they had ways of making at least twine, what we would call string, and, kind of baiting those with salmon eggs. And that's another reason that you can sometimes catch a salmon on a salmon egg, is because it's not that the salmon is trying to eat the egg for nourishment, but it's typically going to try to move it from one area of the stream to another. So they pick it up with their mouths, and if you're the lucky fisherman on the other end, so that's how it works. So they were actually, that was one way they harvested salmon. They also made very intricate nets. They also made parts of the stream. They would make big circles in the shallower water out of rock, and the rock is now sticking up above the surface of the water. But they'd leave a little, maybe a 2-foot opening, and when salmon would go in there, they block the exit. They just put more rocks in, and then they could spear them pretty easily. So, and spearing was obviously a real popular way. They used to make these over 10-foot long dual pointed spears that also had rope in it, because after you spear a salmon, particularly if it's a 50 or 60 pound fish, it's not over when you spear the salmon. That salmon's got a lot of fight left in it. And so they actually made the spear tips so they would break off in the fish, but still be connected by rope to the angler, so to speak, the spear fisherman. Anyway, so they used to harvest. I mean, that was their main source of livelihood for much of the year, and that's why those tribes tend to frequent, those streams that had such huge salmon runs. I mean, that was their main source of food most of the year.
Which is a reason why the leadership in removing the Klamath River dams, which were historically huge salmon runs, the leadership to remove them is the Native American tribe, the Yurok, because I mean, if you think about the cultural, not just it was their livelihood, but the cultural significance of someone whose ancestors completely lived, breathed, ate everything salmon runs, then you understand why it's so important to them to sort of bring that back.
Well, incorporated into a lot of the history of a lot of these Native American groups is, I don't want to use the word religion, but they had kind of spiritual beliefs about the fish, because literally the fish gave them life. So the whole visage of a fish became kind of larger than life. They associated their own livelihood with the livelihood of the salmon, which is, I think, pretty cool.
Yeah. So fast forward, in the 50s, we build Shasta Dam, and that changes everything for the historical salmon runs of Northern California. Now they can't go, all these thousands of fish that came up into the McCloud and the pit, they can't get there, right? And so they build all these fish hatcheries. They built the one on the McCloud, and then they built the dam, and it was flooded. But now we have Coleman, and there's the other one at Shasta Dam, and plenty others in Northern California. But they can't necessarily catch up with what history showed us was a fantastic salmon run. Why is that?
Well, I mean, prior to the erection of those dams, I mean, that spawning population had a chance to grow and grow for literally millions of years. At least we believe that. And so, it's not something that just happened. It evolved over a long period of time. But you're right. Principally, it was the winter run salmon that used to habitat the upper Sac and the McCloud and the Pitt River. These are fish that enter freshwater mid-April to August. Okay. And so that was the run that was the four runs that exist in the Sacramento River. That was the run that was most impacted by the erection of those structures. I mean, but a salmon, a lot of people don't know this. A salmon doesn't really make a choice if it's going to spawn. It's going to spawn. It's a question of where. If it can't get to the place that it's genetically programmed to go back to, they're going to spawn somewhere else because they have to. Their body makes it not a question. They're going to spawn. So
it's like a human being pregnant. That baby's coming out no matter what, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They don't think, well, I'll spawn or not spawn. No, it's not. It's not like that.
Yeah.
So if it can't spawn where it wants to spawn, it's going to spawn somewhere else. But so many fish, as we were talking about, come from the Coleman Fish Hatchery, and you've got you want to see a mob scene, when salmon fishing season opens, which I think is
August 1st. August 1st, yeah.
Right where Battle Creek comes out into the Sacramento River is the most notorious fishing spot on the Sacramento, the barge hole.
The barge hole,
You're talking about walking across the river on fish. You can just about walk across the Sacramento River on boats. I mean, it is a mob scene. But the reason they're there is because there's a big hole there, and the fish have gone up several hundred miles from the ocean already. They're tired. There's a big hole. They can just sit down, rest on the bottom in there before they ascend Battle Creek and complete the last part of their journey. But so it's Fish City. I mean, there's just tons and tons, literally, of salmon in that place. So it's kind of good to see. I mean, I don't really like looking at the sea of boats on a barge hole,
right?
Particularly a couple of days of the season. But it's good to know that the fish are there. There's a real good reason for those anglers to be there as well.
So when these dams erected, both I guess Keswick and Shasta Dam, they started spawning the fish at Coleman, and they basically created. That's where the fish now go, right? I mean, they sort of changed the GPS system within this species of salmon. Is that correct?
Well, not necessarily, because you've got, like I said, 4 different runs, and primarily when they built Keswick and Shasta and that sort of thing. The run that affected was the winter run fish. Those are the fish that utilize those systems as opposed to something like Battle Creek. But throughout the years, since Coleman Fish Hatchery was erected, they're suddenly they're putting more fish in the system than anywhere else. So you've got those returning fish that are genetically programmed to go back to Battle Creek. I don't think they're necessarily trying to find the hatchery, but they just recognize the smell, the taste of the water they were spawned in. And so since, we've denied access to the winter run fish to these upper streams, it's given the fish that used to that go to Coleman just a huge advantage, while the winter run fish and the fish that used to spawn up higher are at a huge disadvantage. So that's kind of how things evolve.
I see. And the closure in Redding, the fishing closure from, what is it, April to August, I believe, that is to help the winter run?
Primarily, yes.
And that's just to decrease the pressure on all fish in that area.
Yeah, exactly. The EPA is got the Endangered Species Act, and different runs have different status. From endangered to threatened, and so the EPA has terminology like that sort of measures, how much danger the fish are in, and what has happened to their dwindling populations. So if we want to maintain the health of the Sacramento River, it's critical that salmon are going to continue to be a huge part of that ecosystem. Everything in an ecosystem, like a stream, is connected. If there used to be millions and millions of salmon going up a stream, and suddenly there now are hundreds and hundreds instead of millions, that's going to have a huge impact on every other creature that lives in that ecosystem. When salmon decompose, their body basically turns into chemicals, but those chemicals are instrumental in coating the structure on the bottom of the river with what an angler might call fish slime. But it's an organic substance that comes from the decomposing body of the salmon. And, from there comes, zooplankton, as you're going up the evolutionary chain. Aquatic insects and plants rely on zooplankton. Then larger fish eat the smaller fish. So you can't take one thing like the salmon out of a system like that and expect there not to be a huge impact on everything else that lives in that ecosystem.
I like to think of it, and this is sort of an opposite comparison, but it's like if you take 75% of the cars out of LA is just changed forever, right? Everything is different in Los Angeles. So you're right. I mean, just there, it goes, it impacts every which way on the, I guess the circle of life you could call it. But I'm always fascinated, and I don't think a lot of people know, the Sundial Bridge, when they built it, they built it as a working sundial, which I guess it's only once a year it's a working sundial, but it doesn't touch the water at all because they don't want to impact that salmon run. So much of things that are done on that river, particularly in that section of the river, are to help the salmon run. So I always find that fascinating.
Well, it's, you can, at various times of the year, you can look down into the water from the Sundial Bridge and see many, many salmon redds and spawning salmon. And, you can even see a lot of times the schools of trout back behind those redds, ready to ambush any egg that becomes dislodged. So that's one of my favorite things about the Sundial Bridge. It gives you that unimpeded view, and that is a really, really heavily used spawning area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen dozens of dead salmon just laying in the river below. Well, this is fascinating to me. I love these salmon stories. The article about this fish went pretty viral on our website. So I thought I'd get our resident expert to come on and talk about it.
And before we let you go, of course, I have to jump in here, Dad, and just say a couple things. One, Zach and I haven't seen you in person since his wedding in January, so it's always great to see you. And you look fantastic. I know this is a podcast, but we are making a video of this, so if you're just listening, just take my word for it. But I will say, Dad, your hat game has not changed in 30 years. I want to say that some of my hat vibe comes from you, not the style, the vibe. Your hat game is on point today. The backwards hat with the little hair showing is always fantastic. With the
Kangol hat.
Is
that what that is?
Yeah, and the Where's Waldo glasses.
Don't worry, Brian. Someday you will acquire style as well.
I can't wait for that day. But Dad, it's always great to see you. Your insight is always appreciated on our podcast, and we miss you. And so I just wanted to say that.
Well, two of my favorite human beings on the planet are the ones I'm looking at right this moment.
All right, let's not get too mushy.
Look forward to seeing you guys next month.
Yes, and we're gonna keep having you on. Every time I have fishing questions, I'll just save them all up, and we'll try to do this once every couple months.
I'd love that, you guys.
All right, talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that was our conversation with the Chipmeister, Chip O'Brien. He obviously knows so much about the fish and the environment of Northern California, specifically the Sacramento River. He wrote a whole damn book on it. So it's always fascinating to talk to him. Now let's go catch up with our good friend, Marcus Duvoisin, who founded Ooowee Adventures, and he's going to give us some updates on what they're doing. Let's go to Marcus. All right, now we'd like to welcome onto the podcast our good friend, Marcus Duvoisin with Ooowee Adventures. Ooowee! How's it going, Marcus?
Hey, how's it going? Coming at you live from Enterprise High School. This is my classroom.
Just a reminder for everyone out there, Marcus is a teacher, and I guess you're on the job right now, right?
I'm on the job. Yeah, we're doing, today's our remote day, so the kids are at home.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can't imagine what your life is like right now with everything that's going on and trying to be a teacher at the same time. But I commend you, good sir, for the hard fight that you're doing.
I mean, we're on a hybrid schedule, so we only have half as many kids on campus. So for me, it's been great. In terms of the stress level of managing 15 kids versus managing 30 kids.
Yeah.
Great. So.
That's good. Well, just to remind anyone who didn't hear the podcast we had with you in early July, you started this guiding company called Ooowee Adventures, and you take groups out on these different hikes and experiences and rock climbing events out in Northern California, and you do it basically on a donation basis. There's no fee to it. You just kind of accept donations as part of it. So I have to ask you, how's everything going so far? How have your trips been this summer?
It's been going great. We had an outdoor yoga trip to Chemise Peak. Alexis Brown from Balance Yoga came out and led that. About 8 people. So we hiked to the top of Chemise Peak, and there's a flat area, and she led a yoga session. Such a great teacher. She's really good at leading yoga. And then I took 2 people up Castle Craig. We did Cosmic Wall. These are people that have climbed before but wanted to kind of get to the next step, the next level. Do something called multi-pitch climbing, where you go about 100 feet and then go another 100 feet. So in total, we did about 600 feet of climbing, and they were really jazzed. I posted some. Check us out on Instagram. Some good pictures of those 2 people. And then the next day after that, I led top roping and anchor building and had a belay session at Burning Limestone. So that was a bigger crowd. We had about 10 people come out for that. That was fun. And Ryan Thompson led a Mount Lassen photo hike. So we did the summit hike of Mount Lassen. and then took some star astrophotography shots.
So you did it. You went up Lassen Peak into the night and took pictures, and then came back down with headlamps.
Yeah, we kind of hiked up on sunset, so we got some pretty cool sunset shots.
Gotcha.
We hung out at the summit for a while, and then actually this guy Josh brought this laser pointer that he bought from Mexico that shined. I mean, it had to have been illegal or so. It shined through the air, like it just kept going. You could shine it and look like all the way to Mount Shasta, and that made for some pretty cool photos.
Nice. So what's been your favorite trip so far, if you can name one?
The climbing trip. Obviously.
Your specialty, yeah.
Yeah, the Castle Crags was really, it was just cool to see people push their limit into the cosmic wall to go up 600 feet. And they've never gone that high before. And you could tell that they were really kind of pushing themselves a lot to do something that they didn't think that they could do.
Were they sort of brand new to rock climbing, or had they done some indoor stuff?
They've done some indoor and outdoor, but I would say that this would be their biggest climbing outdoor day for them.
So it's you sort of open this unique business where you're not trying to get rich off it. You're trying to inspire people to get outdoors, something that I think is super cool. And we're trying to spread the word for you because it's just been awesome to see what you guys are doing. What's been the response to these trips so far? Have you gotten some good feedback?
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, a lot of returning people coming. I basically did a block of trips in June and then a block in August, and I have a big trip coming up in October, the Mega Adventure Weekend.
Mega Adventure, yeah.
And Mega Adventure. People coming back and donating when they come out, which I appreciate, and just asking a lot of questions, basically getting hooked on the sport that they're coming out for. And yeah, that's what I'm shooting for, is people come out and try out climbing or try out mountain biking or photography and get really hooked in it. Just want to do more things outside.
So tell me about this Mega Adventure, because it's sort of your big trip. You got all your guides coming out, right? And you guys are taking a trip up to Oregon?
It's going to be at Smith Rock State Park. It's going to be October 2nd, the Friday to Sunday. So we'll come in that Friday night, and then Saturday morning, Alexis Brown's going to lead a morning yoga session, and then I'm going to take people out. So I have a bunch of different activities that you can choose from. You don't have to do everything, and some are overlapping. And that's also a way to keep, I'm capping the event at 25, so kind of make it to where really there's only like a group of 10 people in any one station. But we're going to be doing some morning yoga. I'm going to be taking people out climbing. Brian's going to lead a sunset photography hike. McKaylin, who works at Country Organics, he's going to lead an organic camp cooking class.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to, yeah, it's going to be fun. I don't even know what he's planning on cooking, to be honest, but, he, whatever, he leads our backpacking trips, and he always has some good food, so looking forward to that. And then Josh Payton has some DJ equipment, and he's going to lead an animal onesie DJ set.
Whoa.
On Saturday night, so that should be cool. And then I'm going to do a hip-hop pancake breakfast on Sunday. And then Scotty Shoemaker, who leads Reading Acro Yoga, is going to lead an acro yoga session on Sunday morning, and that's going to kind of end the trip.
So do people have to have all their own transportation and camping gear and everything like that?
Yeah, you have to bring your own camping gear. I'm going to leave it optional for people if they want to carpool. Obviously, some people are more comfortable in getting in cars with other people than others. The same thing with a mask. I'm going to encourage people to wear a mask if they're in close proximity with people, but it's a personal preference.
Right. Yeah, the masks have been so weird. You know, I went on a hike with my wife and we brought masks, and it's sort of a popular hike around Sacramento. And, you know, the reason you get out into the outdoors is so you don't have to wear a mask, right? You can like breathe in the fresh air and sort of get away from all this craziness. But there were so many people out there that, you know, we had to put it on. So it's just been a weird, you know, when do you put it on? When do you take it off? I guess we're all new to this, but so
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so me personally, if I'm hiking the majority of the time, I'm not going to wear a mask because I'm not in proximity. But let's say we're at a bottleneck and there's like an observation deck and there's like 30 people crowded in a space. I think just having one in your pocket, you can just like, oh, I'm in a crowded space all of a sudden, and then I can pop one on. But I don't really get if you're like isolated on your own with whoever you already came with, and then you're like uphill hike. I think you're just like running out of breath at that point.
right.
And
Yeah.
keeping it on the whole time is the best manageable.
I'm right there with you. I think, you know, getting outdoors and finding a spot that's sort of out of the way is the best way to sort of escape all this stuff that we're dealing with today. So, but you should have the mask handy just in case. So I'm actually curious. I've never been to Smith Rock State Park in Oregon. What's the deal with that place?
Okay, so Smith Rock is awesome. I mean, I mainly go there to climb, but it's a great hiking place too. It has this huge feature called the monkey, and it's a big tower, and it looks like a monkey's head, and you can actually climb into the mouth of the monkey. You should definitely like flash in an image of this. So if you just Google the monkey in Smith Rock State Park, you'll see this big feature, and that's probably the coolest rock climb there in the area. I've seen people set up slack lines that are like 500 feet across these rock canyons, and they'll slack line across them. There's a river that runs through it. It's just a really pretty area. It's about 45 minutes north of Bend, Oregon. You've probably been to Bend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's over up by Bend, basically.
Gotcha. I love Southern Oregon, and unfortunately, you know, we're active NorCal. We do stuff in Northern California, but I wish I could just like inch over the border a little bit, you know, with the Crater Lake and all the waterfalls in Southern Oregon.
Dude, it's active Pacific Northwest.
I know. I really killed myself with the name by putting us in one section, but
I think it's all relative of like your guys' goal, the people in the area of like where is there cool outdoor places in the area, and I definitely wouldn't box yourself into just NorCal. Yeah, Southern Oregon has some awesome places to go to.
Well,
so,
we've actually done a bunch of Oregon stuff, and we just put on the headline road tripping. You just, you know, especially if it's, you know, like Crater Lake is like a 3.5 hour drive from Redding. So it's you're road tripping just over, you know, the border. But
yeah, I mean, you guys talk about Yosemite, and that's even further drive. So.
Right. It's funny. Yosemite was like that was a selfish thing on my point where I said, well, I want to talk about Yosemite. Let's just push the border of NorCal a little bit further south. And of course, people get all mad about that. But
I mean, I think the general gist is like people are looking for weekend trips somewhere, and you guys can cover, you know, where can you go for the weekend?
Right.
So, yeah, it's all accessible.
That reminds me, weren't you in Yosemite recently?
Yeah. So I went this past weekend and I did something called the Triple Crown. I basically just like killed myself is what I did. On Saturday we did Tenaya Peak, Mathis Crest, and Cathedral Peak all in a day, all in this big, massive climbing day.
I'm so curious, and I don't want to go on forever here, but what everyone's saying is Yosemite is you know, this summer is different than any other year you'll find it, right? You usually have 5 million people a year visit that place, and they're limiting that to at least half, What was it like, Yosemite without the people?
Yeah, and I was in this place called Tuolumne Meadows, which is a little bit, it's like right above Yosemite, but it's still technically Yosemite National Park. But yeah, I mean, definitely, we didn't hit any crowd. We barely saw any other people out there. I think the smoke definitely deterred people as well. Which, for the beginning half of the day, it was bluebird skies. It was awesome. And then in the middle of our climb on Mappus, this huge plume of smoke just like came over. It was really like spooky, and it was like something out of a movie.
Was that was this past weekend?
That was this past weekend.
Oh, that was the creek fire smoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy. Well, Marcus, keep doing good things, man. I enjoy watching all your adventures and everything. Where can people sign up for your mega adventure on October 2nd?
It's Ooowee Adventures. So it's OOWEE Adventures.com. And you'll see it on there to sign up. And October 2nd, 4th.
You've gotten good at explaining the spelling of Ooowee. Because last time I talked to you, you said you had trouble explaining how to spell it to people, and now you just go OOWEE.
I just pull out of my pocket. Here you go. OOWEE.
Ooh-wee. Well, Marcus, keep doing good things. Yes, again, October 2nd, mega adventure. Check it out at OOWEeAdventures.com. Marcus, thanks for coming on, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks to Marcus for coming on, giving us an update on all the cool stuff he's doing. He is staying busy, and quite frankly, right now he's dealing with the virtual learning in schools. So shout out to Marcus. He's doing some seriously difficult work. But thank you for listening to this episode of the Talking NorCal podcast. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're everywhere. Like us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We'll have all sorts of video highlights from this. And most importantly, thank your local firefighter. Everyone stay safe. We'll come at you soon. And remember, stay active.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little mental when we visit Sacramento. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we protect nature's bounty when we visit Humboldt County. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal.